Last week, members of the British Parliament approved a motion in favour of recognising Palestine as a state. The British government is not bound by the vote and it won't result in any immediate change in policy. However, the vote reflects a growing change in European public opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Earlier this month, the Swedish government said it will recognise Palestine, and there are more votes planned in other European countries. To look at the impact of these recent developments, we begin with CCTV's Richard Bestic in London. And Richard, what can you tell us about this British vote? I mean, was it merely symbolic, or will it lead to a change in policy?
And yes, there was a high degree of symbolism in that vote, but as with everything in politics, it's not a consequence-free symbolism. It is a clear message to the UK government of David Cameron. If he didn't know before, he understands now that on the issue of Palestinian statehood, his government's policy is significantly out of step with his parliament, and by a wide margin. And while a government in the short term can perhaps put that sort of thing to one side for strategic purposes, in the longer term, ignoring Parliament is a divisive game to play. For the time being, though, the UK government's formal position remains that of the European Union. Palestinian statehood should arise only from negotiations with Israel. The vote in Parliament hasn't changed that, Anand.
Richard, what was the motivation behind this vote? I mean, is it being driven in the United Kingdom by public opinion?
In large part, probably. The images of Israeli attacks on Gaza over the summer months shocked many in Britain and have, in the view of some, triggered a sea change of public opinion. Certainly, the debate in the UK Parliament's House of Commons was a deeply emotional affair, and I think it's probably fair to say that members of Parliament wish to reflect that anger at the images people saw on their televisions nightly. Many members of Parliament said the plight of Gaza left them with a greater sense of outrage and anger than any other situation in politics, not just Middle Eastern politics, politics. There were those, of course, who spoke up in favour of Israel, but the overwhelming view was one of high emotion, viewed through the political prism of Palestinian statehood.
Now, Sweden says it will recognise the state of Palestinian. There are resolutions tabled in other European countries as well. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the new Swedish government's position is interesting and possibly part of a European trend. As it stands, Sweden is the first standing government among the EU's 28 member states to declare it intends to recognise a Palestinian state. Those that have already, such as Hungary, Poland and Slovakia, did so before joining the EU. The new Swedish government would, of course, expect to come under diplomatic fire from the United States and Israel. However, there is also the possibility of criticism for breaking ranks from the European Union. That's not to say, Anand, that Sweden's respected position within the EU won't trigger a break in the floodgates. The Spanish Parliament, for example, is about to vote on it. Senators in the Irish Parliament's upper chamber have signed a motion calling for a change of their government's policy, and that has the backing of all parties in the Irish Parliament, the Dáil. And there are even murmurings of change in other capitals too, not least Paris. So slowly, a head of steam does appear to be building across the European Union for a pan-continental recognition of Palestinian statehood. Anand.
Thanks, Richard. CCTV's Richard Bestic there reporting from London.